In this movie, we're going to take a look at the hypergraph. The hypergraph gives us a schematic view of all of the nodes that are in our scene. The hypergraph is a node-based editor. Now, what does this mean? Let's take a look. If we go to Windows, we can see that we have two different options here to select our hypergraph. We have hierarchy or connections. We can choose either one of these, and from within the hypergraph window, we can toggle between hypergraph hierarchy and hypergraph connections. So it really doesn't make a difference. Either of these are simply a shortcut to get us to a specific location. I'm going to choose hierarchy, and the hierarchy window gives us a top-level view of those nodes that are in our scene. Every object inside of Maya is represented as a node. So you can see here that P-sphere 1 is a node, this square object, and I can click on it. And that is the same as going into my viewport and clicking on the sphere itself. So not only is it represented as geometry that we can see in our viewport, but also as a separate node. And that's what these objects are here. And each object that we see on our scene has several nodes that we're going to see as we dive deeper into our hypergraph. Now, manipulating the hypergraph is just like manipulating the camera in our viewport. If I hold Alt and right mouse button, I can zoom in and zoom out by scrolling left to right here. We can also hold Alt and middle mouse button in order to pan around our hypergraph window. Now, left mouse button is reserved just for selecting. We do not need to hold Alt. We can just click. By clicking into empty space, we deselect our nodes or our objects. By clicking on a node, that will simply select it. Now, notice that we get a pre-selection highlight whenever we move our mouse over one of our nodes. This is very useful, especially since the hypergraph can get crowded very quickly, and you can see we have infinite space out here to allow us to add as many nodes as possible. When we get large scenes, we're going to get a ton of nodes. And as I alluded to earlier, each object is actually made up of several nodes. So this is going to get complex very quickly. If we're zoomed out, that pre-selection highlight will also give us the name of the object, and you can see it out there so that we can quickly identify what it is. Now, we also have the same hotkeys that we do with our viewport cameras. If I press F, that's going to frame our selection. If I hit A, that will frame all. Now, the hypergraph is meant to show us all of our nodes, but as we look right here, we can see that all of our nodes are really not being represented. We should have some other things. For instance, the perspective camera. And if we go to a 4-view, we know that we have 3 other cameras out there as well. Those are not being shown here. And the reason for this is just that there is a filter preventing those from showing up. If I go to Options, Display, I can check Hidden Nodes. And this will then show those hidden nodes. And those nodes are my camera nodes right there. I can select those camera objects or camera nodes just like I can any other object or node. Notice that the camera nodes are grayed out. They are a lighter shade of our other objects. This indicates to me that they are hidden or their visibility is turned off. Where these objects here, their visibility is turned on. Doesn't matter. We can still select them inside of our hypergraph, and then that will in turn select them in our world. Essentially, selecting them here is the same thing as selecting them here. Now we can also go up to Options, Display, and turn on Shape Nodes. Shape nodes allow us to see our objects broken out into individual nodes. And let's scoot this over just a little bit and take a look at the channel box at the same time. So if we're looking at P cube 1, we can now see that P cube 1 is made up of 2 different nodes. And if I look in the channel box, I can also see that it's being represented here. I have P cube 1 and P cube shape 1. We can select these individually, but most importantly, what this is telling us is that this top node is the transformation node. This holds all of the transforms of the object. This is the node that actually positions it in the world. Whereas the node underneath, and you can kind of tell by the icon that is represented there, this is the shape or the geometry that is actually making this object up. All of our nodes or geometry nodes are made up in this manner. We have a transform node and we have a shape node. Now we can dive even deeper into our nodes by switching to the connections editor or the connections portion of our hypergraph. And this is the same thing as going to Windows Connections with a node selected. I'm going to just go back to the hypergraph here and instead choose this icon right here, which will show me all of the input and output connections. This is the same as going to that Windows Hypergraph Connections options under our drop-down menu. So we'll click on that. And what that's going to do is give me an exploded view of the nodes that make up this object here, this cube. I have my transform node, and I can click on it and move it anywhere I want to. And then there's my shape node. So we've already seen all of these nodes, but then there is an additional node here called Polycube 1. This is a history node. It contains information that was used to actually build this cube. And if I select it, I can see those options over there in my channel box. I can grab it and relocate it, and it's not going to affect my object at all. And the reason why we like to grab things inside of our hypergraph here and move them around is just for our own brain so that we can see how things are intermeshed or connected together in a logical manner. But we can also select those individual channels and break them. Now, breaking this is not going to help us at all here, and we'll take a look at what goes on there a little bit later. Now, to switch back to our top level scene hierarchy, as you can see here, we can just click this icon and return back to our original view. Now, inside of the hypergraph, we can manipulate these nodes in a couple of different ways. First, we have our parenting or grouping that we looked at previously. We can do those same types of connections inside of our hypergraph. If I go to pcube1 and I want to unparent it from psphere, I can go to the transform node, the top level of pcube, middle mouse, and drag into empty space. I'll just let go of the mouse button and that will break that parent-child relationship. Now what I cannot do is break a transform and shape node connection. So if I click on the shape node and try to drag that off, Maya's not going to let me. If we did that, then the geometry would have no idea where it's positioned in space. Essentially, it should just disappear then. We don't want that. That's going to just break functionality. If I want to parent these back up, I can take pcube1 and drag it to psphere, and it is now a child of psphere 1. I could also, while this is still a child of something else, I can just middle mouse and drag it. We can go to group 1 and make it a child of group 1 and not a child of the sphere. So making and breaking parent-child relationships is very easy inside our hypergraph. We can just middle mouse and drag. Now we can also change the layout that we have inside of our hypergraph, and we can switch from a freeform layout or automatic layout. Now currently we're in automatic. This is going to let Maya choose the position of our nodes for us. But if I choose freeform, then I could grab these just like we did inside of our connections window and rearrange these to something that makes more sense to us. At any point in time, I can go back and change that layout to automatic, and it will put that together into a straight hierarchy. But we can toggle back and forth, and Maya will remember the difference between the two layouts. We can also change the orientation by going to a vertical layout or schematic type layout. And we're just going to switch back to horizontal. And I'm in free form there, so let's just go back to automatic. The hypergraph is an important window as it does show us a lot of things that are happening inside of Maya simultaneously while we're working. We can see those nodes get generated. We can quickly see parent-child relationships. It's a good idea to have our hypergraph open while we work so that we can see a lot of those complex connections that are happening essentially under the hood. It's also a good idea to get used to seeing the various nodes that Maya creates and also what they do. And again, the bigger our scenes get, the more nodes we're going to have inside of this hypergraph. So it can get very confusing very quickly. Once again, it's a good idea to have this open and become familiar with it as soon as possible.